Hey, what's up guys, Josh's Boosters here and welcome back to another Digimon video. Some actual content today, because as I'm uploading this, BT11 should be about 1 week away, which also means that finals is, getting pretty close. And you know what that means? We're gonna do another tier list for the BT11 format. So I have 5 tiers here, just explaining it really quick for those who are not familiar, even though I guess at this point everybody's familiar with this format, right? But yeah, we have tier 1, which is the best decks, and the only decks I'm going to be putting here are decks I would expect, or at least not be surprised if they actually won finals. So that could be either Oceanics, North America, or Europe, of course. So yeah, basically one of the decks that, I say is tier 1 is one of the decks I would expect to win those finals. Then in tier 1.5, I will also list decks that, I potentially think they could win finals, but I think they would have to get pretty lucky with their matchups. Like last format, I put Examon in tier 1.5, and it actually did end up winning an Ultimate Cup in Oceania, I think. But that was because I think he played against 5 MetalGarurumon and 2 Grandis, so he only played good matchups, and that's exactly the type of decks that I want to be putting into tier 1.5. Tier 2 is decks that I think would definitely, they will be able to top the event. And I guess if you're really, really lucky, you could win, but I definitely wouldn't expect any of those decks to top the event, to win the event, but I think they could definitely top if they have a good pilot and are lucky with the matchups. Then for fun, basically, it is what it is. If you want to just go for fun, then you can play these decks. And you won't have fun is a little bit below that, where those decks are probably so bad that even if you do take them, you're not gonna have a really good time. But yeah, we have a lot of decks to rank. I think it's 31 or something like that. So I don't want to waste too much time. I will be taking more time looking at the new decks, because, you already should be familiar with the older decks. So yeah, the first deck we have here is Examon. Don't think we have much to say about this. I'm gonna be putting this in for fun. I don't really think it's quite that bad, you won't have fun, because I think the deck is it's quite good. It has basically all the really access to the really good blue card pool. However, it's basically like BloomLord at home, right? Where if you want to be playing a deck with this playstyle, you should probably just be playing BloomLord. And we didn't really see this deck perform at all in the past format, and I really don't expect that to change with the BT11 format, since it won't be getting any support. Then the next deck we have here is the Black Antibody deck, the Alpha Ryuken deck, basically. Honestly, I still think this deck is good. I've been playing a little bit the past format, and honestly, it was probably better than I expected. I even considered playing this at regionals at one point, and I also think it got second place at the Ultimate Cup or regionals in this past format. The deck is still very consistent. However, it's a little bit more glass cannon than it was before they hit to WarGreymon, right? As we all know, that card was limited, which I still think is a little bit unfair, but this is not a ban list discussion video, so yeah, I'm gonna be putting this in tier 2. I definitely think if you pilot this deck well, then it's, you can definitely do well with it and make it to the top 32 at finals. Wouldn't surprise me at all. Then the next deck is a very interesting one, which is actually Bagra Army, which up until now it didn't really do anything. However, in BT11 we will finally be getting the big boss, which will be Blackwargreymon, which has pretty strong on-evolving effects, depending on how many Digimon your opponent has on the field. And the most interesting one's the one where you can put one of your opponent's Digimon as a source under one of their other Digimon when they have 2 or more Digimon on the field, which is basically a removal effect where there is no counterplay against at all. I don't think, at least, or no protection against at all. However, yeah, if you are familiar with what this deck does, if you're playing a stack deck, you shouldn't be playing out any rookies next to your big stack, or it will just get, basically removed from the field by the Blackwargreymon. And yeah, the other cards in this archetype, they didn't really do anything in the past few formats. However, I'm going to be putting it in tier 2. I might change my mind a little bit later and put it into for fun. However, I do think the Bagra Mon effect is very strong, and definitely if your opponent isn't familiar with what your deck does, you can catch him off guard. So I'm gonna be putting it at like bottom of tier 2 probably, or at like top of for fun, I'm not quite sure yet. Then we already have one of the big contenders. Honestly, like, it kind of blows my mind how people are talking about this deck like it's gonna be the only viable deck. And I'm a huge Blackwargreymon fan. I've played it at like every event since BT8, pretty much. And I definitely think, yes, the new support is very, very strong. And then I'm especially talking about the Tamer and the new Greymon and MetalGarurumon X antibody cards. The new Blackwargreymon X antibody, I honestly don't think it's that good. Like, yes, it's a good card, but it's not like game-breaking, where both Yuya, or is it Yuya, and the MetalGarurumon X are both of them just granting incredible protection to your stack. And then, of course, the Greymon X antibody solves one of the issues where all your guys are really expensive to evolve into, where now basically you will be evolving into your level 5 for just a 2 cost usually, which is absolutely insane, of course. Yeah, this is obviously a tier 1 deck. If this wins finals in any of the regions, would make a lot of sense. However, I don't think it's the best deck. We will be getting to what I think is the best deck a little later on. But yeah, I do think this is a tier 1 deck, and you definitely should be prepared for playing some rounds against this deck when you're at finals. And honestly, you should keep that in mind when you're deciding what deck you want to play, because this deck has some matchups that are basically auto-win. And the security control matchup also got a lot better now with for this deck. So yeah, if you want to play something like security control, definitely you should keep the existence of this deck in mind, basically. Then we have Greymon here, which we are using to represent Blue Flare. And Blue Flare, I think, is pretty much a tier 2 deck. I honestly don't think the playstyle for Blue Flare will be changing a lot in the coming format. However, Greymon is very nice, where it will allow you to basically do another check from your MetalGarurumon. Basically, you need 3 memory to do 2 checks of your MetalGarurumon if your opponent has 2 Digimon in play usually. And this Greymon will change that to 3 checks, essentially. So it will allow you to close out the game a little bit faster. However, Blue Flare still suffers from the same problem, where it has a really hard time playing against single stack decks like MetalGarurumon, Blackwargreymon, Grandis, which I all think will be very popular decks going into the next format. It has a good time playing against stuff like Jesmon, which I also think will be a little bit more popular going into finals formats, BloomLord and Commandra. But yeah, this deck is very matchup dependent, and I really don't think that its good matchups will be represented so much that this has a good shot at actually winning the event, which is why I'm going to be putting it in tier 2. I definitely think the deck is good, don't take me wrong. It can play security bombs, and it can be very, very annoying to play against. But yeah, if this deck somehow wins finals, I would be very, very surprised. But yeah, I think it's good, and I definitely think if you get a little bit lucky with your matchups, you can definitely top an event with this. Then the next deck we're going to be looking at is MachineDramon. So this deck basically gets support every single set, and every set, I think a lot of people are really hoping it will become, a good deck. And is this set finally the set where it does become a good deck? I'm not sure. Analog Man is very, very strong, very good support. And I honestly also think the new MachineDramon, which basically floats into the old MachineDramon, is also very, very good support. And a friend of mine told me that this has a very good matchup against Blackwargreymon, which again will be a very popular deck. And honestly, this deck might be a little bit underrated. Not a lot of people are really seriously playing it, and I did see it do it like relatively well at regionals the past weekend. I don't think it got top 16, but it got very close. Like if it won the last round, it would have topped. Yeah, it's a little bit hard to judge. I'm going to be putting it into tier 2 here. Like, probably if you're playing a lot of good matchups and you are lucky with the cards you are, drawing in your opening hand, this deck might be good. The new support is very, very good for the archetype, but I haven't really tested with or against this at all, to be honest, so it's really kind of hard for me to put it any higher than tier 2. Then, yeah, moving on to D-Reaper, you won't be having fun playing this. I do think that Blackwargreymon will be getting a lot more popular than it was, because people are very, very hyped about this deck. I would honestly say it's overhyped, even though I do think, again, it is a tier 1 deck. I think people are saying it's like unbeatable, you can't beat it. with any other deck. If you want to win, you have to play it. I don't think that's true at all. However, I do think a lot of people will be jumping on the Blackwargreymon bandwagon, which basically makes Mother D Reaper unplayable, right? And if you're unlucky, you can even lose to the raid decks, which is kind of funny, which we'll be talking about in a little bit. But yeah, I really don't think you should be bringing this to finals and expect to have a good time, because there's just no way you are gonna beat Blackwargreymon. And other decks can also just outspeed you and stuff like that. So yeah, I wouldn't really recommend playing this deck. Then moving on to D-Brigade. This deck underperformed a little bit, I think. I think it got like 1 or 2 tops last format. And I don't think the deck is bad at all. Like, definitely not a for fun deck. And I definitely think you can top playing this. However, once again, this has a pretty hard time going into Blackwargreymon, which I think bumps it down a little bit in the tier list. And I'm going to be putting it as a tier 2 deck. I'm going to be putting it at the top of tier 2 though, because I do think it's probably better than the other decks in the tier 2 category as of now. Even though I do have to admit it does have bad matchups against some of the decks that are that are in there. But yeah, this deck, even when you're playing against a bad matchup, it can definitely just outspeed your opponents. And you can just rookie rush them down, right? And it does have cool removal tools with the new Darkramon. I'm still a big fan of this deck. But yeah, I'm gonna have to put it in tier 2. Then moving on to another deck which I'm a big fan of, which is DarkKnightmon. Yeah, this doesn't get any support in the new set. Well, it sorta does. It gets this level 5, which can evolve over level 5 for 2, which I think can be interesting because it has a nice float effect where you can add back 2 cards from your trash when it's deleted. I'm gonna be putting up on the screen because I can't remember the name right now, but I honestly don't think it's support that actually, you know, that's good support that actually will put it up a tier. I think in my last tier list I had this in tier 1.5, but I'm gonna have to be honest. I'm gonna have to put this in tier 2. Probably somewhere over here. Probably a little bit on the same tier as the Alphamon deck is. It did perform a little bit though in the last format. A lot of people didn't notice this, but it got like 2nd place at the Ultimate Cup. And it got 17th place at the regional last week, all piloted by the same guy. And I definitely think like if good players play this deck, it might perform a little bit better because it can just kind of rush your opponent down, and then, you know, you force them to basically move out their stack, and then you get rid of the stack with the BT10 DarkKnightmon. And it does have some good matchups against stuff like Crossheart as well. But I can't really see this deck winning the event. And that's the criteria I want for a tier 1 or a tier 1.5 deck, right? So I'm gonna have to be putting it at tier 2. Another tier 2 deck is Gallantmon. This doesn't really get any support. Honestly, it's kind of underperformed, I think. In the last format, I think a lot of people thought this deck would be very strong. And it did get some very good and new tools, but I don't think it really performed at all. And with no new tools, I really can't see this any higher than tier 2. Which is why I'm going to be putting it. I'm also not going to be putting it in for fun, because I definitely could top, I think, if piloted by a really good player and if you're, you know, getting lucky. But yeah, tier 2 for Gallantmon it is. Then moving on to Examon. I'm going to be putting this, I already talked about it a little bit at the start of the video, but I'm going to be putting this in the same spot it was last format, which is tier 1.5. This deck is just, it's very high rolly and it has very good matchups against decks that are going to be popular, I think, in this format. It has a very good matchup against Blackwargreymon, has a good matchup against Grandis, has a good matchup against MetalGarurumon, has a good matchup against Jesmon as well. Basically, every single one-stack deck has a very hard time playing against Examon. Oh, and against Ulforce as well, almost forgetting that. So yeah, gonna be putting this in tier 1.5. You can definitely just high roll, just face good matchups the entire tournament, not brick, get out your Examon, and then all of a sudden you just win the event. Even if you brick, like, if you manage to get to Examon at some point in the game, it's usually enough to win the game because the deck is just, or the card, I should say, is very, very oppressive. So hard to out, and especially the SlayerDramon Inheritable, where you have to swing it and you can block and just get rid of your opponent's deck's absolutely insane. So yeah, it would kind of surprise me if it won the event, but like I can definitely see it happen. Once again, you can just high roll, just face good matchups, and then Examon is very, very powerful. Then moving on, we have the 4 Great Dragon deck from EX3, yeah, this is just a for fun deck, basically. I don't think it's terrible, but I don't really see this stopping finals at all. Don't really gonna say much more about it. I talked about it a lot in the past video, and yeah, it's what it is. Grandis. So yeah, basically I will expect this deck to be more popular than it was in the past format, because it has a very good BlackWarGreymon matchup, and again, a lot of people are going to be hopping onto that deck, and this is just pretty much a hard counter against that deck. I'm going to be putting this at tier 1.5, because I don't think it's as strong as the other decks I want to be putting in tier 1, basically, and mostly because it suffers a little bit from consistency issues. And it also has a very bad time against decks that have strong security, because it doesn't really have any protection at all. You just basically, you move out and you go for the kill, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and you just lose the game. But again, it does have a very good time against BlackWarGreymon, because the deck is kind of slow, and this deck just basically, it suspends your guy, that it runs over it with piercing, and then the game is pretty much over for the BlackWarGreymon player. And also, it can just outspeed you and just kill you before you even get to the big stack. Even though I do have to admit, with the new Greymon, it gets, you know, you get to move to your big stack a little bit faster than before. But yeah, I could see this deck winning the event, but I definitely think other decks have a higher chance of actually winning. And once again, you do have to get a little bit lucky with your matchups when you're playing Grandis. So yeah, BloomLord, I think this is a tier 1 deck. I don't think it underperformed in the best form, to be honest. It got quite a few top spots, multiple top spots at most events. I do think this deck has a little bit of a higher skill ceiling than most other decks, which is why it maybe doesn't perform as well as some other decks, because it's very hard to play. It will have a little bit of a hard time playing against BlackWarGreymon, I think. I think that matchup is a little bit rough. But it's very consistent. It can just hire opponents super quickly and just take the game like that. It can play very aggro, it can play very controlly. You know, Hydramon is very controlly, and BloomLord is very aggro. Yeah, I wouldn't expect if someone who's really good with this deck, or wouldn't be surprised if someone who's really good with this deck wins finals. I'm gonna be putting it to the bottom of tier 1, I think, though. But yeah, I think this deck is very good. Mastemon, I think this is a little bit like Examon. Honestly, I wouldn't really know if it's like better or worse than Examon, to be honest, because it's kind of the same. Mastemon can high roll very hard. Like, basically, if you get all your pieces in your first hand, then there's almost no deck that can really beat this deck, except DevX, because that's always rough when you're playing Mastemon and you get DevX'd. But yeah, I think it's very much like Examon. If you do get good matchups with this deck, then you're gonna be having a really good time. And if you're high rolling with this deck, it's a bit like Grandis, you're also gonna, you know, beat most of your matchups. And once again, this is a deck that has a really good time into the BlackWarGreymon deck, because it's one of those decks that can attack unsuspended Digimon, and that's something that BlackWarGreymon really struggles with. Even though Yuya is boosting your stack, right? The Mastemon stack is just gonna be so big that it just should just easily swing over your BlackWarGreymon, and there's really no counterplay from BlackWarGreymon there. So if you do manage to play against a lot of BlackWarGreymon, you're probably gonna be having a good time playing this deck. And again, you can just high roll, so I definitely think this is a tier 1.5 deck. Out of the decks I currently have in tier 1.5, I think it's the least likely to win finals, but could happen. Security control kind of hurts me to put it here, but yeah, I'm gonna be putting it into tier 1.5. Primitive had a tournament, I think it was the past weekend, which was basically the first BT11 tournament, like proxies were allowed, and Security Control actually won the event. And I honestly thought this was gonna fall off super hard, because BlackWarGreymon has such a good matchup against it, supposedly, with, you know, the Yuya Tamer being just so strong against this deck. But you have to see it, and Security Control does have a really good time against all the decks that are basically played to counter BlackWarGreymon. So if you're playing against more decks that counter BlackWarGreymon than you're actually playing against BlackWarGreymon, you're probably gonna have a good time. It has a really good matchup against Grandis, against MetalGarurumon, against Mastemon as well. Yeah, sadly, I really hoped we would have seen the last of this deck for a while. However, it's probably here to stay, which is rough, because I don't think anybody has a good time playing against this deck. But yeah, again, this could just win finals, and then everybody would be upset, I think, but sadly it's something that could happen. However, I would expect it to run into Blackwargreymon a little bit too often in Top Cut at some point and then just lose out, but yeah. Security control, right. Then we have Marsmon here, which is basically the raid deck, which is the new keyword that says if you are attacking, you can change the attack target to your opponent's Digimon with the highest DP, which is nice. That's definitely a cool new mechanic, and it can go super aggro because I think Grappleomon also has the inheritable where, like, if you switch the attack target, you can trash the top of your opponent's security. And then this guy says, I think, you can restand him and then gain memory for every red tamer you have in play and just, you know, get rid of your opponent's security in one go, basically. However, I do think the support for this archetype at this moment is a little bit lackluster. I do think everything has to go really, really well for you to actually close out the game with this. You could also mix this with the Phoenixmon deck, I guess, but for now I'm gonna be putting this as a for fun deck. It does have a good Greymon matchup, Blackwargreymon matchup again, because it can attack your opponent's unsuspended Digimon, which is what the deck loses against, kind of. But I really think this deck needs more support to actually, you know, do something good. So yeah, I'm gonna be putting this at the top of for fun, I guess. Then we're moving on to Mirai here, which we are using to represent Mastemon, and yeah, this deck is very, very cool. I really think that the new support is going to be changing this playstyle of this deck a lot, because previously you were usually just hard playing something like MachineDramon to end your turn and end of turn Gatomon evolve into your Mastemon, but with Mirai, you're actually going to be able to play this deck a lot more aggro than it was, because Mirai basically says, I'm going to put it up on the screen as well. But if you evolve into Lady Devimon or Angel Woman, you can basically play out the other one from your hand for free. And I'm pretty sure that both Angel Woman and Lady Devimon, they also say if the other one is played out, you gain 1 memory. So you're not going to be passing your turn when you are going to be going into your Mastemon, which is obviously insane, because then you can actually pop some of your opponent's cards with the Mastemon Lucemon combo or whatever you want to be doing, and then also swing in with potentially security attack +1, or you're gonna be using your Mastemon as like a huge blocker, kind of similar to Blackwargreymon actually, because the new Angel Woman has that inheritable where it becomes a blocker. And I really think if you have a memory tamer up as well as Mirai, you're going to be able to evolve into your Gatomon for 3. You will start to turn at 4 because you're going to be gaining 1 memory from Mirai, and then always start at 3 because of the memory tamer, right? Then you're going to be able to evolve into your Gatomon, and then also evolve into your, what's it called, level 5 for 1, and you're going to be able to keep your turn. So you can basically go up from a Rookie in Raising into your Mastemon in the same turn, which is absolutely bonkers. And this deck also has a really good matchup against stuff like Grandis, Ulforce, and what's it called, MetalGarurumon, which I all think are very, very powerful decks. And I'm actually going to be putting this deck in tier 1 right there behind Blackwargreymon. It does have a bad Blackwargreymon matchup though, or well, yeah, it's bad. I was gonna say it's not that bad because of the security options, but I'm really thinking in the past, because now Blackwargreymon doesn't really suffer from Chaos Degradation and stuff like that. So yeah, I really think if you bring this to the event, you should have a pretty good shot at performing very well. Mirai is absolutely insane tamer. Yes, the cost to play it is high, but the payoff is definitely there. And I also think the rest of the new support for Mastemon is very strong. So yeah, if you just, you high roll to get your matchups and you don't brick too hard, then you should be having a pretty good time playing this deck. Then another purple deck we have here is Mervamon, which is an interesting one. Last format I thought the Mervamon loop deck would be very powerful, but it kind of underperformed, in my opinion. But now with this Mervamon, it's becoming even quicker. One of my friends has been testing this, and he mentioned you can do like 5 checks in 1 turn very easily with the Mervamon, because it says you can play out the guy, right, and then all your guys with Retaliation or Crossheart, I guess, they get Rush, so it makes it even easier to do a lot of checks, and it also doesn't lose that hard to security bombs like some of the other decks. You can also play Mervamon in Crossheart. I did see some lists from the OCG format, basically, where they were taking Mervamon into Crossheart to basically rush your opponent down. I saw like a crazy list with 4 Blinding Ray and 4 Gravity Crush, and then You just make use of the rush ability for all your little guys to get rid of your opponent's security. But yeah, we're talking in this instance about the Mervamon loop deck, and I'm gonna be putting this at tier 1.5, just because it's one of those decks that can high roll really hard. It is very hard to play though, so I definitely think if you want to be bringing this deck to finals, you should know what you're doing with the deck. But it can go very, very hard, and I definitely think it's a better deck than the decks that are on tier 2. So yeah, tier 1.5, and then we have the poop deck, right? We have the King Sukamon deck or the Examon deck, which is very funny because it revolves around turning your opponent's towers into 3000 DP white Sukamons. However, other than that, it doesn't really accomplish that much, right? I mean, you can swing with your King Sukamon and will get like security attack plus for every Sukamon I think there is in play, but it isn't that big. And then yeah, you can sort of swarm the field with the Metal Examon, but I think it's a very funny deck, and I actually am gonna put it above the raid deck, because it can definitely do some degenerate stuff with the King Sukamon, but I don't really see this topping finals. But I know you're welcome to prove me wrong, because I would definitely love to see this deck top. And if you top with this deck, be sure to reach out to me, because I definitely want your deck profile. But yeah, I'm gonna be putting this in for fun, but I really want to be proven wrong. Then we have the king of the Digimon card game since BT9, pretty much, which is MetalGarurumon, which I think is the best deck. I think since BT9 this has been the best deck, and I honestly think even going into the new format, this is still the best deck. It's just super consistent, super aggro. Even if this deck gets outed, it's just because while you're doing your combo, you're drawing so many cards, it really isn't hard to build up a new stack when you get hit by a security bomb or something like that. It can definitely still outspeed Blackwargreymon like it did in the past. It does have a bad Mastemon matchup though, so that's where it gets a little bit worse maybe, because I would expect Mastemon to become a little bit more popular. So you're maybe going to be playing against that a little bit more often, which is a hard matchup, but this deck is just inherently so incredibly strong, and I really don't understand why there's still, hasn't been a hit to something like Cool Boy or something like that. But yeah, MetalGarurumon, in my opinion, is still the best deck in the format. It is what it is. Then we have Dragonlinks. I don't want to be talking about this too much, but I'm going to be putting this in for fun. Even though, yes, it can do certain strong stuff. It can finish out the game with WarGreymon and the, what's it called? MetalGarurumon. The unplay effect, which you can trigger with the Hina, of course, is very powerful. However, that's exactly the thing why this deck became even worse in this form than it was before. Because I expect Blackwargreymon to be more popular, which has an easy time outing Tamers, and this deck literally doesn't do anything without Hina face up. So yeah, this is gonna be a for fun deck. Then we have another new deck from BT11, which is Mirage Gaugamon. And sadly, I also think this is gonna be a for fun deck. Probably the best one though. But the gimmick is a little bit weird, where you basically force your opponent to draw cards or, get cards to their hand via security, and then the effects of the Mirage Gaugamon trigger. Just a little bit gimmicky, but the thing is, like, even if you do trigger those effects, it just isn't that good. I don't want to be dwelling on this deck too much. I do think the new support that was just announced for BT13 is quite nice for this deck, and that we might see it break into the competitive metagame at some point, but I don't think this is the format for it. Then, actually, I have a lot of BT11 decks left. We have the Vaccine Phoenixmon deck. I don't think this deck is very good. It's a little bit like the Marsmon raid deck. I just think it needs a little bit more support, and what it's trying to be doing, it just isn't that impressive. You can mix the decks though, like Marsmon, Phoenixmon, which is cool, where you basically use Marsmon as like a finisher. But yeah, really the game plan for this deck is just a little bit weird in my opinion. Where, yeah, it just doesn't really seem to have a very good win condition, so I don't really know much to say about it other than that. The next deck we have here is the Galacticmon deck, which I think is a little bit, yeah, I don't know if I want to be putting this in tier 2 or for fun. Basically, the issue this deck suffers is it's another one of those really big stack decks, right? But the protection effect is a little bit not quite there. And it's really hard to set it up because the engine doesn't really... You basically want to spam your trash with Venom, but the engine doesn't really allow you to do that, so you have to do that with non-engine cards like Analog Youth or Pride Memory Boost. And yes, those cards synergize really well with the deck, so that's nice. But you need to see those non-engine cards to really get going, and even if you do get going, it's just like a stack deck where other stack decks, like Blackwargreymon for example, or even Alphamon, I think are a little bit better than it. Yeah, but I'm gonna be putting this in tier 2 though, I think. I was struggling a little bit between for fun or tier 2, but it can definitely high roll once again if you do see those options or tamer I talked about. It's nice and it can definitely do some cool stuff with the entire evolving mechanic where you can evolve from like level 4 to the level... Is Galacticmon level 6 or level 7? I'm not even... Level 7 I think? I'm not even sure, but like yes, it does have cool stuff. The deletion effect doesn't have any restriction to it, so you can just delete a Digimon basically, which is very nice with the Galacticmon. But yeah, I don't really think it's gonna make waves and like win the event or anything. Then we have this is one of my faves actually. We have Tyrannomon. I'm a huge Tyrannomon fan. Just think the design is very cool, but basically I think this deck needs too much setup to actually get its game plan off. Because you want to be running over your opponent's Digimon to basically trigger the good effects of your Tyrannomon, but basically you need like 2 stacks to make the most use out of it, because you need like a stack with the new Ninjamon to suspend your opponent's Digimon, and then you also need to stack with the... Well, I guess technically it could be the same stack, but you definitely also want to go into the Tyrannomon at some point to play out your Tamers and stuff, the new Tyrannomon from BT11. Yeah, I just think this deck needs so much for it to go right, and it also doesn't have any consistency cards really, except for a green memory boost, and you do need that specific stack to do the stuff you want to do. I do think this deck is very, very cool, but yeah, probably it's like on the same tier as the Phoenixmon deck, which is a shame. But now we're getting to a really good BT11 deck, which is Ulforce. I'm going to be putting this... Yeah, honestly, I think Blackwargreymon, Ulforce, and Mastemon, they're all like around the same power level, to be honest. Ulforce is definitely a tier 1 deck. This deck has some crazy infinite combos. And you can also play the Leomon engine, which I think is very strong with the... Man, I can never remember the name of the tamer, which you can just play out. Which has the effect like on play, you can play out the Leomon, and then you bring out the Leomon, which has, if you have a blue tamer in play, it has blocker, and then if it's leader, you gain 2 memory, so that's very, very strong, like in a control-y way. But then aside from controlling the game with the Leomon engine, you can also do so much damage with the Ulforce, with all the tamer shenanigans. The Mirai tamer is very strong, and the Ulforce, like the when Digivolving effect can be triggered with the oh, it's not Mirai, it's what's it called, the blue tamer. Man, I can't remember. I'm gonna be showing it on the screen, but you know, the new secret rare blue tamer. And then it has the other effects during the main phase, which is not once per turn, so definitely keep that in mind. That effect is not once per turn, so you're gonna be able to trigger that a lot of times, which is what makes this deck so strong, right? So yeah, it's very, very fast, very aggro. You can also play control with the Leomon. I definitely think this deck is very, very strong. And the good thing is, like, you might think, because it's like such a tamer based deck, it's gonna have a hard time against Blackwargreymon. However, you're gonna be able to just play all your tamers in your turn basically while you're doing the combo. So you really don't suffer that much from the Blackwargreymon blowing up your tamers. So yeah, I think this deck's very strong. And then we have one of the most underrated decks from the past format, which definitely, it won a couple of events. It even got like multiple top 4 spots, is WarGreymon X, which actually also gets a boost, I think, from the new Blackwargreymon sport. And I'm also going to be putting this in tier 1. I just think it's a little bit similar to the MetalGarurumon deck, only the MetalGarurumon deck draws even more cards while it's doing its plays, which makes it even more consistent and has an easier time getting back up into the stack. However, the WarGreymon X, I definitely think it's a tier 1 deck. Honestly, I think it's a little bit better than BloomLord. Because, once again, it has just inherent protection against security. And you can just do that huge swing with the black, or the regular WarGreymon X, I should say, and then finish out the game with the Omnimon X antibody from BT10. I think we're all familiar with what this deck does. It's just a lot like MetalGarurumon, and that's just very, very strong. You can potentially, if you want, even try to play some text to make it easier to beat the Blackwargreymon deck. Even though I don't think the matchup is that horrible to begin with. But yeah, I definitely think we will see some WarGreymon X top the event. And then the last deck we have here is Crossheart, represented by Shoutmon, Omni, something something. Very big name, but I also think this is a tier 1 deck actually. And I think it has been even ever since the ban list. It did win regionals last week, and I did a deck profile, which I will link somewhere here, where one of the guys who got top 4, he mentioned there's like multiple routes to go with this deck going into BT11. One of them is like the Merva route. You can also go for the big guy. But I really think the Rookie Rush route is still very, very strong going into the next format, basically. But, you know, the big guy is definitely a very nice boost to the deck. I don't think the playstyle will change too much. It will just get like more versatile. And the deck is already very fast. It's a little bit like D-Brigade, where it's just, even if you have a bad matchup, odds are you're just going to be able to close out the game before your opponent even gets to the cards that make it such a bad matchup. So I definitely think this is a very good contender to win finals as well. Yeah, I think that's it, right? We went through most of the decks. Honorable mentions actually go to ImperialDramon, which wasn't included here. But if I did include it, it would probably be a tier 2 deck, because it's ImperialDramon, right? You can always just rush down your opponent if you get your pieces quick enough. And Yellow Hybrid is also a deck I want to mention, which is probably also a tier 2 deck. Mostly, I think it was like tier 1.5 probably past form, but with Blackwargreymon probably getting more popular, I expect it to be a little bit less good and go to tier 2. But yeah, that's it, guys. Let me know in the comments what you think will be the deck that's gonna win finals. Either of them, of course. Or what will be the deck with the most tops, stuff like that. What are you looking forward most from BT11? And yeah, I'll see you in the next one.